Big Four Finance Transformation. Interview Preparation. Part 1. Questions 1 through 25. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into finance transformation interview preparation used across Big Four consulting teams. These questions come from real interview patterns across Big Four firms and global capability centers. Finance transformation focuses on redesigning processes, technology, data, and operating models so the finance function becomes faster, smarter, and more strategic. Let's begin. Asterisk. How do you conduct a current state assessment of a finance function across people, process, technology, and data? Sample answer. I start by meeting teams across finance, R to R, O2C, P2P, FP&A, to understand how they work today. I assess skills, workload, handoffs, approval layers, and process complexity. Then I review technology usage, ERP, workflow tools, spreadsheets, and automation. I also check data quality, master data ownership, and reporting structures. I document gaps across the 4 pillars and summarize them into a maturity view. Always include people, process, tech, data, maturity score, 0. The CFO wants to shorten the month-end close from 10 days to 5 days. How do you redesign the close process? Sample answer. I analyze the close calendar step by step and find delays caused by manual work, late inputs, or unnecessary approvals. I move non-critical steps earlier in the cycle, automate reconciliations, standardize JE posting, and reduce spreadsheet activities. I redesign workflows so parallel activities can run together. With dashboards, we track status every day. Always include bottleneck analysis, plus parallelization, plus automation. How do you evaluate finance maturity using frameworks like Deloitte's FMM or PwC's finance maturity model? Sample answer. I assess the finance function against standard pillars: strategy, process, technology, data, talent, and governance. I score each pillar from basic to leading. Then, I compare results with industry benchmarks to show where the client stands. The maturity score becomes the baseline for transformation. Always include scoring, benchmark, and baseline. A company struggles with fragmented finance processes across regions. How do you design a standardized global process model? Sample answer. I map local variations, identify which steps differ, and classify them as must-keep or can be standardized. I design a global template covering R2R, P2P, and O2C. I define policies, handoffs, workflow rules, and SLAs that apply globally. Regional exceptions are documented but tightly controlled. Always include global template plus controlled exceptions. How do you identify automation opportunities in R2R, O2C, and P2P processes? Sample answer. I review each process through repetitive, rules-based steps: data entry, invoice validation, reconciliations, reporting, or status updates. I check whether input data is stable enough for automation. Using an opportunity heat map, I highlight high-impact and low-complexity tasks for bots or AI tools. Always include repeatability plus stability plus heat map. A client wants to move from manual reconciliations to automated tools. How do you assess and implement automation solutions? Sample answer. I analyze current reconciliation volumes, frequency, formats, and exception types. Then I evaluate tools like Blackline, Trintech, or ERP native modules. After selecting the tool, I design matching rules, approval workflows, and exception handling. I run pilots before scaling. Always include tool evaluation plus rule design plus pilot. How do you design a target operating model, TOM, for finance, including SSC, GBS, COE, and automation components. Sample answer. I define which activities stay local and which move to shared services or global business services. I design centers of excellence for analytics, reporting, and automation. I align roles, governance, escalation paths, and performance management. The TOM shows how finance will operate in the future. Always include activity allocation plus governance plus roles. A company relies heavily on spreadsheets. How do you reduce spreadsheet dependency in finance operations? Sample answer. I identify critical spreadsheets used for reconciliations, reporting, or calculations. I move them into ERP logic, workflow tools, or BI dashboards. I implement version control, access controls, and automated data feeds. Over time, spreadsheets stay only for ad hoc analysis. Always include replacement strategy plus control improvement. How do you create a business case for a finance transformation program? Sample answer. I quantify benefits, fewer manual hours, faster close, reduced errors, fewer audit issues, and better insights. I estimate costs for tools, training, and process redesign. I create a 3-year ROI model showing payback. Always include benefit quantification plus cost plus ROI. A business wants to replace its legacy ERP. How do you support ERP system selection and readiness assessment? Sample answer. I gather requirements across finance and operations. I compare ERP options on fit, scalability, cost, and integration needs. I assess data readiness, process maturity, and change impact. The outcome is a recommendation report plus a readiness plan. Always include requirement mapping plus readiness check. How do you transition finance towards a data-driven decision support function? Sample answer. I shift finance from manual reporting to analytics-driven insights. I build dashboards, forecasting models, and scenario tools. I train teams on storytelling with data. Finance becomes a partner to business, not just a reporter. Always include analytics, insights, capability build-em. How do you redesign the chart of accounts, COA? Sample answer. I analyze reporting needs, statutory requirements, and business segmentation. I simplify account structures, define standard naming, and map existing accounts to the new COA. I test with sample transactions to ensure reporting works. Always include simplification, mapping, and testing. How do you integrate a newly acquired entity into finance processes after M&A? Sample answer. I assess their systems, policies, and processes. I map gaps against the parent's finance model. Then, I harmonize COA, close calendars, policies, and controls. I plan integration waves. Quick wins first, complex items later. Always include gap mapping plus harmonization. A CFO faces outdated financial planning practices. How do you modernize FP&A? Sample answer. I shift from offline spreadsheets to cloud planning tools. I automate data refresh, create driver-based models, and improve scenario planning. I redesign workflows for rolling forecasts. Always include automation plus driver-based modeling. End. How do you assess the benefits of AI/ML in financial reporting and analytics? Sample answer. I identify tasks with pattern recognition, anomaly detection, or forecasting potential. I check data readiness. Then I test simple ML models to estimate value, like predicting sales, costs, or variances. Always include use case fit plus data quality. A company wants real-time dashboards. How do you design finance analytics and BI architecture? Sample answer. I identify key KPIs, define data sources, and design pipelines for automated refresh. I build semantic models and role-based dashboards. I ensure governance, so data stays consistent. Always include KPIs, pipelines, governance. How do you evaluate and redesign the internal control framework during transformation? Sample answer. I assess control gaps in approvals, reconciliations, data access, and segregation of duties. Then, I redesign controls to match new processes, including automated controls, preventive controls, and monitoring dashboards. Always include gap assessment plus redesign plus automation. End. A client wants to reduce finance costs by 20%. How do you identify efficiency levers? Sample answer. I analyze activities with high manual effort, duplicated work, or low-value tasks. I propose automation, shared services, process simplification, and standardization. I quantify savings for each lever. Always include levers plus quantification. How do you build a capability maturity roadmap for finance teams? Sample answer. I assess skills across accounting, analytics, systems, and business partnering. I design training paths, certifications, rotations, and hiring plans. The roadmap shows how skills will mature over the next 2 to 3 years. Always include skill gaps, plus structured learning. A business wants to adopt global process owners, GPOs. How do you operationalize the GPO model? Sample answer. I define GPO roles, decision rights, and accountability. I create global policies and standard templates owned by GPOs. I set governance forums for change requests and improvements. Always include roles and governance. How do you design governance for a finance transformation program? Sample answer. I set up steering committees, work streams, clear roles, and issue escalation paths. I define KPIs, timelines, and risk registers. Governance keeps the program on track. Always include structure, cadence, control. A company struggles with long reconciliation cycles. How do you implement reconciliation automation? Sample answer. I analyze reconciliation types and exceptions. I select tools like Blackline or ERP add-ons. I design matching rules, workflows, and dashboards. I run pilots to fix issues early. Always include rules, workflows, pilot. How do you structure a finance process blueprint, future state workflows? Sample answer. I design workflows showing who does what, in what sequence, and with which system. I remove unnecessary steps and add automation where possible. The blueprint becomes the guide for implementation. Always include clarity plus simplification. A firm wants to implement workflow approvals. How do you evaluate workflow tools for finance? Sample answer. I list process needs, approvals, escalations, audit trails, SLA tracking. Then I compare tools like ServiceNow, SAP Workflow, or Power Automate. I test integration with ERP and security roles. Always include requirement fit plus integration. How do you define KPIs to track finance transformation success? Sample answer. I align KPIs to goals. Close cycle time, automation hours saved, reconciliation backlog reduction, forecasting accuracy, and user adoption. I track them monthly using dashboards. Always include outcome KPIs plus dashboards. A client wants to transition from annual budgeting to rolling forecasts. How do you redesign planning cycles? Sample answer. I begin by shifting focus from once-a-year detailed budgeting to continuous driver-based forecasting. I identify key business drivers like volume, price, productivity, or market indicators. I redesign the planning model so these drivers update monthly or quarterly. I automate data feeds from ERP and BI tools and simplify templates so teams can update quickly. Rolling forecasts work best when they are light, frequent and forward-looking. Always include driver-based design plus automation plus frequent updates. How do you assess finance data quality and build master data governance? Sample answer. I run data profiling checks to identify inconsistencies, duplicates, and missing values across vendors, customers, GL accounts, and cost centers. I define ownership roles like data stewards and data custodians. Then I create governance policies for creation, change control, and periodic validation. Tools like MDG or workflow-based approvals help maintain quality. Always include profiling plus roles plus governance. A business wants to implement shared services. How do you evaluate SSC GBS location strategy? Sample answer. I assess labor cost, talent availability, time zone alignment, language needs, infrastructure, risk profile, and long-term scalability. I compare onshore, nearshore, and offshore models. Then I shortlist 2 to 3 locations with the best cost to capability balance. Always include cost plus talent plus scalability. How do you perform technology fit gap analysis for finance applications? Sample answer. I capture detailed requirements across R2R, O2C, P2P, and FP&A. I compare each requirement with system capabilities, marking fit, partial fit, or gap. For gaps, I assess whether configuration, customization, or integration is needed. This gives a clear view of what the new system must solve. Always include requirement mapping plus gap scoring. A company faces audit findings related to financial closing. How do you redesign closing governance? Sample answer. I map the root causes, late inputs, poor reconciliations, or weak controls. I redesign the close calendar, increase automation, and enforce controls like cutoff validations, JE approvals, and reconciliation reviews. I implement a close dashboard showing daily progress and exceptions. Always include root cause, plus calendar, plus controls. How do you structure a migration plan from multiple ERPs to a unified system? Sample answer. I create an inventory of all systems, interfaces, master data, and customizations. I define the sequence of migration. Pilot region first, large regions next. I design data mapping, cleansing, and cutover plans. I ensure parallel runs during initial cycles to validate accuracy. Always include system inventory, sequencing, data plan. A company uses manual journal entries extensively. How do you automate JE posting and approvals? Sample answer. I categorize JEs into recurring, allocation-based, and exception-based. Recurring entries are automated using ERP rules and templates. Allocation entries use automated drivers. For exception entries, I design workflow approvals with role-based routing. Over time, manual JEs drop significantly. Always include JE categorization, automation rules. How do you evaluate whether the finance function is aligned with business strategy? Sample answer. I assess whether finance provides insights that help sales, operations, supply chain, and leadership make decisions. I check if metrics match strategic goals and whether FP&A models support long-term planning. Misalignment shows up when finance reports data but does not advise the business. Always include insight role plus metric alignment. A business wants to improve cash forecasting accuracy. How do you redesign cash forecasting process? Sample answer. I analyze past forecast accuracy and identify problem areas like delayed AR, inconsistent AP cycles, or inventory swings. I shift to driver-based forecasting and integrate data from sales, procurement, and treasury. I automate collection of inputs through templates or BI tools. Always include accuracy review plus driver design. How do you incorporate ESG reporting into finance transformation initiatives? Sample answer. I evaluate which ESG metrics matter: emissions, energy use, DEI, compliance, governance, and waste. I integrate ESG data into finance's reporting platforms, ensuring auditability and controls. Finance becomes the owner of ESG numbers because they require discipline, accuracy, and processes similar to financial reporting. Always include ESG metrics, integration, controls. How do you support CFOs in designing digital finance organization structures? Sample answer. I create a structure that blends business partnering, automation teams, analytics teams, process owners, and shared services. I define role clarity. For example, business partners focus on insights, while COEs handle data, analytics, and automation. Digital finance requires a mix of technical and strategic roles. Always include structure plus role clarity. A client has inconsistent billing processes. How do you harmonize O2C across business lines? Sample answer. I map billing variations across units, identify root causes like different systems, customer groups, or legacy rules. I design a standardized billing model, common master data, pricing logic, approval rules, and invoice formats. I implement workflow approvals and automated billing where possible. Always include mapping plus standardization. How do you design end-to-end P2P transformation, including vendor onboarding and payment automation? Sample answer. I start with vendor onboarding, digitizing forms, validating documents, and creating automated approval workflows. Then, I standardize purchase requisition, PO creation, goods receipt, and invoice processing. I use OCR, IDP, and three-way match automation. Finally, I design payment automation through ACH or integrated bank portals. Always include onboarding plus automation. How do you implement RPA bots in finance processes? Sample answer. I identify repetitive steps: reconciliations, report extraction, status updates, invoice validation, JE preparation. I create process maps, define bot logic, test exceptions, and deploy bots in controlled environments. I track bot success through dashboards. Always include use case selection plus testing. How do you run a proof of concept POC for analytics or automation in finance? Sample answer. I select a small but high-impact process. I define success metrics, build a prototype, test it using real data, and measure improvement. If successful, I create a scaling roadmap. Always include small scope plus clear metrics. A company wants to improve cost transparency. How do you design cost allocation models? Sample answer. I identify cost drivers like headcount, revenue, volume, machine hours, or transactions. I build models that allocate costs based on actual usage, so business units see true cost. I validate the model with finance and business teams. Always include driver design plus validation. How do you address change management challenges in finance transformation? Sample answer. I communicate early, explain benefits simply, and involve teams in design. I run hands-on training, create super user networks, and provide strong hypercare support. I also address fear of automation through clear messaging about new roles. Always include communication plus training. How do you prepare a client for ERP implementation, data cleansing, process redesign, training? Sample answer. I begin with data cleansing, fixing duplicates, incorrect fields, and missing values. Then I redesign processes into standardized templates. I create training plans and role-based guides. When ERP is ready, users understand both the system and the new way of working. Always include data, Process: training. A CFO wants benchmark comparisons. How do you benchmark finance KPIs versus industry leaders? Sample answer: I collect KPIs like close cycle time, cost of finance as percentage of revenue, automation rate, and forecast accuracy. I compare them against industry databases or Big Four benchmark studies. I highlight gaps and improvement potential. Always include KPI selection plus benchmark gap. How do you handle resistance from local finance teams during global rollout? Sample answer: I understand their concerns: fear of losing control, workload change, or system complexity. I involve them early in design, show benefits, run pilots, and give them decision-making roles. Their buy-in is crucial for standardization. Always include empathy plus involvement. A business wants CFO dashboards. What KPIs and data sources do you prioritize? Sample answer: I prioritize revenue, margins, cash flow, working capital, forecast accuracy, automation metrics, and close cycle time. I integrate data from ERP, CRM, SCM, and BI tools. CFO dashboards must be real-time, simple, and actionable. Always include strategic KPIs plus integrated data. How do you design internal controls for new digital processes? Sample answer: I embed automated controls like system validations, maker-checker workflows, audit trails, SOD checks, and exception dashboards. I ensure each digital process has preventive, detective, and corrective controls. Always include automated plus layered controls. A company adopts cloud solutions. How do you redesign finance operations for cloud-native finance? Sample answer: I redesign workflows to use real-time data, API integrations, self-service analytics, and continuous updates. I reduce manual reconciliations by using live data flows. Cloud-native finance becomes faster, integrated, and insight-driven. Always include real-time plus API plus automation. How do you evaluate success of a transformation program post-implementation? Sample answer: I measure KPIs like cycle time reduction, error reduction, automation hours saved, adoption rate, reporting speed, and business satisfaction. I run feedback surveys and compare pre- versus post-state analytics. Always include KPI validation plus feedback. How do you present finance transformation findings and roadmap to CFO, board, and leadership? Sample answer: I simplify insights using visuals, highlight business impact, cost, risk, and timeline. I present a phased roadmap showing what improves in each quarter. I speak in business language so leaders clearly understand value. Always include clarity plus visuals plus business value. Thank you for watching, and if you liked our video, kindly press the like button and leave us a comment. This will help us reach a wider audience. Don't forget to check the playlist for more great learning.